We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Afghanistan back in the hands of the Taliban. President Joe Biden beset on all sides. Inflation and the cost of living run rampant. And gun rights about to face an historic reckoning. Welcome back to Liberty Nation Radio, right here on the Radio American Network. We have a huge show for you this week, packed to the rafters with special guests, insight, analysis, and hopefully more than a little fun. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. And today we'll be joined by longtime host of this show, Tim Donner, to discuss how America can recover from the stain inflicted by President Joe's actions. Andrew Moran will help us cut through the Jordan knot of the car crash economy using his Solomon-like economic analysis. Dave Patterson will be in the hot seat with his unique insight into what went wrong in Kabul. And last, but by no means least, we'll be talking liberty with Scott D. Cosenza to discuss the upcoming fate of the Second Amendment in America. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news and analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. We've got all this and a whole lot more coming right up, right here just for you on Liberty Nation Radio, on the Radio American Network. The Afghan president has left the building and, in fact, the country. The Taliban are in control of what is now being called the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, or the IEA. And a new humanitarian and refugee crisis awaits America and Europe. Was the whole debacle avoidable? And in the fallout, who really bears the responsibility? To join us in this mass unraveling of the Afghanistan disaster, we're joined by Dave Patterson, retired U.S. Air Force pilot and the former Principal Deputy Undersecretary of Defense Controller, who's written extensively on just about every aspect of this situation on the pages of LibertyNation.com. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me on the show.
Always an absolute pleasure. Now, Dave, it seems that at the heights of the Taliban takeover, Joe Biden was nowhere to be seen, off enjoying the idyllic atmosphere of Camp David. And now that he's back at work, as Desi Arnaz might have said, he's got some splaining to do. I want to play a short clip for you, Dave, of a July 8th presser that President Biden gave and get your opinion on it.
Is a Taliban takeover of Afghanistan now inevitable?
No, it is not. Because you have the Afghan troops have 300,000 well-equipped as any army in the world, and an Air Force against something like 75,000 Taliban. It is not inevitable.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Your own intelligence community has assessed that the Afghan government will likely collapse.
That is not true.
Can you please clarify what they have told you about whether that will happen or not?
That is not true. They did not reach that conclusion.
So what is the level of confidence that they have that it will not collapse?
The Afghan government and leadership has to come together. They clearly have the capacity to sustain the government in place.
And do you see any parallels between this withdrawal and what happened in Vietnam, with some people feeling...
None whatsoever. Zero. What you had entire brigades breaking through the gates of our embassy. 6, if I'm not mistaken. The Taliban is not the North Vietnamese army. They're not remotely comparable in terms of capability. There's going to be no circumstance where you see people being lifted off the roof of a embassy of the United States from Afghanistan. It is not at all comparable. So the question now is, where do they go from here? That the jury is still out. But the likelihood there's going to be the Taliban overrunning everything and owning the whole country is highly unlikely.
This is emblematic of the progressives' way of looking at the world. They see the world and all of the dangers in it the way they wished it were. It is not like that. And the consequence of that way of viewing the world is, well, Afghanistan.
How could he get this so wrong? I mean, surely he has a team of highly trained, experienced experts and professionals around him to not only guide him down the right policy path, but to guide him in what he should and should not be saying. How did it go so wrong?
Well, I think that perhaps the assumption that he's surrounded by highly experienced, competent experts may be a stretch.
So it's my fault. There we go. Problem solved. No, please carry on, Dave.
No, and I mean, everybody that he has surrounding him parrots the goofy stuff he says. And for a long time, so did the media. But I think the media, as we experienced on Sunday the 15th on the morning talk shows, perhaps have gotten some religion.
Absolutely. Specifically, I think you're referring to Jake Tapper's evisceration of Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
Yes, Mr. Tapper was having none of the excuses and really held Blinken's feet to the fire, as everyone should.
All right, now, Dave, after the Bay of Pigs catastrophe in 1961, President John F. Kennedy, he surprised everyone and took responsibility. And now this is quite a watershed moment, some would say. He said, I've said as much as I can feel can be usefully said by me in regard to the events of the past few days. Further statements, detailed discussions, and not to conceal responsibility, because I'm the responsible officer of the government, he said. Now, his approval rating went up after this admission. Do you think Biden has the backbone to do the same?
Yes, I think that President Biden would take responsibility for the Bay of Pigs debacle. Whether he takes responsibility for Afghanistan, that's another matter. I doubt it. Already, the administration has talking points that blame, well, President Trump, of course, and their own intelligence people. And that's just simply not true. Even the DOD IG knew and predicted this outcome back in the 1st of May. Now, perhaps they're not readers, but as General Jack Keane said, they knew and yet proceeded with this ill-conceived withdrawal.
David, it's almost certain that there will be a rush of refugees coming to America and to Europe, and a lot to the UK as well. And I'm reminded of 2015 when we had the first major refugee crisis, and ISIS said quite clearly in a statement that they would exploit the refugee crisis to send hundreds of fighters into Europe under the guise of being refugees. Now, we saw what happened to Europe after that, what that wrought. There were terror attacks, murders aplenty. And now, obviously, we've seen the scenes at the Kabul airport with people desperate to get out. Are people going to be exploiting this situation? Will we see the same thing again? I guess my question is the Taliban more interested in domestic affairs right now than foreign?
Oh, I think that the Taliban in the near term is going to reestablish their Sharia law, their harsh retribution on those who helped the government, and establish their very violent regime. They did it before. Why would we expect this to be any different? Despite their comments about Afghanistan is a different country and the times are different. They've already started, as Reuters and the BBC have told us, to take out retribution on those cities that they've captured with horrendous acts of violence against the people, beheadings, etc.
Are we about to see ISIS 3.0?
Absolutely. This is the most dangerous part of what has happened, what the Biden administration has allowed to happen in Afghanistan, and that's the resurgence of the pockets of ISIS and Al-Qaeda and other extremist jihadist groups. We take this on generally in the wrong way from the very beginning, and until the West understands that it is the ideology that they have, this jihadist savagery that they practice, until we take on the ideology, then we're always going to be playing whack-a-mole with these people.
We know that Beijing recently met with the Taliban leadership delegation. This was before the fall of Kabul. So the Chinese could see the writing on the wall here. So I have a two-part question for you, Dave, for me. Number one is, how could the Chinese government have been fully aware that this was about to happen, but not the American government? And secondly, how will having the very rich Chinese partners shape any future U.S.-Afghan relations?
Well, to the first one, the Chinese knew about this and were prepared because they chose to look at things realistically. The Biden administration, on the other hand, chose to look at only those things that fortified their strategy and their desire to move out of Afghanistan, despite all of the indicators to the contrary. On the second, I think that what you're going to see is, China's China. They're not changing their stripes. China will be friends with Afghanistan in order to exploit everything that Afghanistan would have to offer if the Afghans were in fact in the 21st century. But I guess the best that we can hope for is that the Taliban will treat the Chinese who are there to exploit them the same way they treated us who were there to help them.
Dave Patterson, thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Mark. Always good to be on your show.
Now, don't go anywhere. Later in the show, we'll be talking liberty with Scott D. Cosenza. We'll be looking at the attacks on liberty happening right now and to find out just how much trouble your rights are really in. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Who are we? We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.